What is up, guys? Thank you so much for being here. So today I'm doing a review of this guy, which is the Sony 16-55 f2.8 lens, and why I think that it's still the overall best lens for the APS-C cameras. Okay, so first I'm going to talk about the build and features of the lens, then I'll get into my pros and cons, and then I'll wrap up the video with who I think should buy the lens or why you should buy it, and why I still think that it's the overall best lens for the APS-C cameras. This has a 67mm filter thread size, weighs 494 grams or 17.5 ounces, has a 9-blade circular aperture, and a minimum focus distance of 0.33 meter or 1.09 feet. They also gave it a weather resistant construction, and it's not weatherproof, but it says it's weather resistant, and it has one of those rubber gaskets right along here, so that way no water can get into your lens mount. In addition to all those specs, they also put some nice features on here, like this custom button, which you can customize to do anything, but also it has this switch right here so you can switch between autofocus and manual focus. That way, if you don't want to use one of your custom buttons on your camera, you can just do it real quick on here and just switch from autofocus to manual focus. You've got a nice zoom ring, obviously from 16 to 55. It's not too firm and it's not too loose, which I like because you can't even do it because it's so snug. But lots of times when it's too loose, this part will just slowly come out and you'll be walking around with your camera all the way zoomed in like that. And the focus ring is really nice too. It's not the nicest, smoothest focus ring I've ever felt, but it's definitely above average, especially for the APS-C lenses. And so it turns real smooth. Plus both of these rings have a nice rubber texture on there, so it'll be easy to grab if your hands are super cold or if you're wearing gloves or anything like that. Plus it just looks really high quality, and it feels high quality too, because some lenses just feel really cheap and they're kind of ugly even if they work well. But this one, in addition to working really well and having all these nice features and good construction, it also just looks and feels high quality, at least in my opinion. Plus it just looks cool, so that always helps. As for the pros of this lens, the first one is definitely what we were just talking about when it comes to the build and all the features we just mentioned and the weather resistance. And one thing that I didn't talk about is how compact it is. Now if you zoom in, it does get a little bit longer, but even this, I guess it is a little bit longer than maybe the average APS-C lens, depending on what you're getting. But for what this is super compact, especially when you compare it to any kind of full frame lens. I mean, you're getting from 16, which is wide, to 55, which is a little bit telephoto, plus you get that f2.8 aperture. So when you're getting all that in this small compact lens, you can just throw it on your camera and walk around with all that versatility. I think that it's super compact, and that's definitely one of the pros. I'll save the best pro for last, but the next couple are the autofocus and sharpness. And the autofocus is really good on this thing. It's super solid, especially because this is a Sony lens, and so if you're using it on your Sony APS-C camera, that means it's a native lens because it's a Sony on a Sony. And so you're always gonna have better autofocus when you're using a native lens because it just is built to work with your camera. The sharpness, on the other hand, not only is it a pro of this lens, but it's probably one of the sharpest lenses for the APS-C cameras, especially the sharpest zoom lens for the APS-C cameras. I mean, this thing, I've seen videos where they compare it to a lot of really sharp prime lenses, like some of the Sigmas and things like that, like the Sigma 16, the Sigma 30, and even some of the other Sony primes, and it's sharper than pretty much all of them. The only one that it's maybe not as sharp as is the Sigma 56, but every other lens that I've seen this thing compared to side by side, I'm not gonna do, in-depth zooming in and showing you all the pixels and all that, but I've watched a lot of videos like that, and the only one that I saw that was sharper than this for the Sony APS-C cameras was that Sigma 56. But all the other ones it's been compared to, especially all the other zoom lenses, they just don't even compete. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of other sharp lenses out there, but this one's just razor sharp, and so that's definitely a pro. In addition to the sharpness is also just like the overall image quality. And so what I mean is like the colors and contrast that comes out of this lens without any editing or anything like that. I just think that it looks really good, because like some lenses aren't really contrasty enough, and some of them have like maybe a weird color tone to them or whatever. But this one, I just think the overall image quality to go in addition with that sharpness, I just think that the photos look really good out of this guy. Now the last pro, which is probably one of the main reasons why you would buy this lens, is that F2.8 aperture. And by the way, I'm just gonna take off this lens cap. It looks a little cooler with the glass showing. And in case you were wondering, it does come with a little lens hood, which can come in handy. But anyways, so that F2.8 aperture, the reason why it's so valuable is because, for one, having a wider aperture like that, so F2.8 compared to like an F4 lens or something like that, the F2.8 gives you a shallower depth of field. So if you want to be able to like blur out the background and isolate your subject, this is going to do it a lot better than like other zoom lenses that are only like an F4. It's not like you can't find this F2.8 aperture in other zoom lenses for the APS-C cameras, but it's just that some of those might not have the same zoom range, or they might be a lot larger lenses. And so I just think that this one executes it the best. But the F2.8 doesn't just come in handy for like that shallow depth of field, although it is really nice, especially at night when you're using the F2.8 and you've got lights in the background, and then you get that nice bokeh, which is like when the lights in the background turn into large circular balls of light, and they just look really cool because they're blurred out. And so that is another cool feature of the F2.8. But in addition to that is the fact that it's so good in low light, because anytime you have a wider aperture, you're letting in more light, and so you're gonna do better when you're taking video in low light. Because when you're taking photos, you can always adjust to let in more light by like lowering your shutter speed or something like that. Now the F2.8 still helps for photos in low light as well, because you can only lower your shutter speed so much before you're gonna not have sharp photos, because there's gonna be too much motion blur or something like that. So it helps for photos as well. But for video, it really does make a big difference, because you really wanna keep your shutter speed double your frame rate so it doesn't get all wonky. And so you can't just like lower that to make more light, and so you have to boost your ISO. And if you have to boost it too much, then it's just gonna look all grainy and your footage just isn't gonna look great. And so that F2.8 really makes a big difference anytime you're taking like low light video or anything like that. So the F2.8 is like the best pro because of the fact that you do get that low light video and the shallow depth of field to be able to take nice portraits when you're zoomed in and stuff like that. But one pro that I almost forgot to mention, because I was gonna leave that as the last one, but it's also just like the focal range. I mean, it is a little obvious, and so that's why I almost forgot to mention it. But the fact that you get from 16 millimeters, which is nice and wide, all the way to 55 with everything else we just talked about, that's obviously one of the main pros, and I didn't want to just skip over it even though I almost forgot to include it. But with that being said, let's move on to the cons. Now, I was only able to think of like 2 real cons, and one of those is the fact that this guy doesn't have OSS, which is optical steady shot, which means it doesn't have stabilization in the lens. And so if you have like a Sony a6500 or 6600 or any other camera body that has stabilization in the body, then you don't really need to worry about that. So that kind of like cures you, because it's not really a huge issue then. If you don't have one of those cameras, then it is gonna be a little bit difficult for you to get like some good stable video, like moving video. Now, for the most part, you can just set this on a tripod, even if you're out like doing a vlog or something like that. Get your shots and then add a little bit of movement in post, like a little zoom in, a zoom out, things like that. There's a lot of ways that people use these kinds of lenses that don't have a camera with stabilization. So you can definitely work around it. For me, I have an a6600 and my full frame camera that I can use this on as well, and they both have stabilization. So for me, it doesn't really matter. Now, the only other con that I could really think of is the price, because it ain't cheap. This thing comes in at $13.99, so basically $1,400 which you could definitely go out and buy like 2 or 3 other lenses for that same price. And unless you're talking full frame lenses, then probably not. But if you're like wanting good high quality lenses, you could get some prime lenses instead. But then, you know, of course you don't have the advantage of being able to just walk around with the one lens. You got to be switching lenses so you can have your telephoto for portraits or something, and then your wide and all that. You know, there's a reason why it's so expensive, because of everything that you get. But those are the only 2 things that I could think of. And honestly, once you do have it, that's no longer a con, because you spent the money, you have the lens. It's not like that price affects the performance of it. So as for who would buy this lens or why you would want to buy this lens, for one, it could be really good if you're buying a camera and you just kind of want to get one lens and not have to worry about switching lenses or anything like that. It's just really good for that, because obviously you have a good range from wide to more telephoto. You can go wide and you can vlog and, you know, or just capture obviously more of the scene, or you can go more telephoto with 55 and you can take some nice portraits. And so it just really gives you a lot of versatility. And for somebody who doesn't want to like mess around with having a bunch of lenses and having to switch back and forth and things like that, this is definitely like pretty much the one solution, or one of the main solutions out there, to just buy it, know you're getting a premium quality glass with good features, it's gonna perform well. Or maybe you have other lenses, like a prime lens for like your wide shots, that's like an even shallower depth of field, but then you can't do anything else with it. And then maybe you have like a portrait lens and you want something that's for in between and that can kind of cover all your bases, because you have those other lenses and they're good for like those specific things, but you just want like that walk around lens where you're not really needing the best of the best for portraits or the best of the best for this one specific thing. You just want something that's overall super high quality, and you don't need to bring a bunch of lenses with you. And so that's kind of what it was for me, because at first I had some wide lenses and I had some real telephoto lenses, but I didn't really have anything in between. And so even though I wasn't buying this to make it like my one and only lens, it was still like filling a void that I didn't have in my lineup. And the reason why I think that this is still like by far the best lens for the APS-C cameras is because even though there's some lenses that have shallower depth of field and maybe 1 or 2 lenses that are sharper, there's just not like a single lens out there, in my opinion, that has like the combination of everything that we talked about. Yes, there's other really good zoom lenses, even that are F2.8, but they just don't have the same range and they're just not the same compact size. They're not the same level of sharpness. This lens offers the most compared to any other lens for the APS-C cameras. And so I just think that it's overall still the best. You know, you can let me know in the comments down below if you disagree. I know there's some pretty good ones out there that compete with this, but you know, it's expensive for a reason. So with all that being said, I really hope you guys enjoyed the video and I hope you got something out of it. And if you did, definitely hit the like button. It's like a super simple thing that you can do that really helps out my channel, so I would appreciate that. And if you like this kind of content, like anything that has to do with camera gear, lens reviews, I've done like backpacks, like camera backpack reviews and anything like that, definitely subscribe. I've got a good amount of videos on my channel already. Plus I'll be putting plenty more out in the future. And last thing I wanted to mention is if you're curious about all the other gear that I use, I'll put links in the description down below. And so if you're interested in something, you can just click on one of those links and it'll take you to Amazon straight to where you can buy it. And if you do get it through Amazon, I do get like a small percentage from them and it's at no cost to you. So that helps out my channel as well. So I would appreciate that as well. But with that being said, I just want to thank you guys so much again for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.